The longest government shutdown in U.S. history has come to an end. Last night, President Trump signed a bill to reopen the government after it was passed by the Senate with the help of Democrats and then by the House. Trump once again blamed Democrats.
Democrats in Congress shut down the government of the United States in an attempt to extort American taxpayers for hundreds of billions of dollars.
And after weeks of delay, Democrat Grijalva was sworn into Congress. She became the final signature needed to force a House vote on the Justice Department releasing all of the unclassified Epstein files. Meanwhile, the White House is facing more question over President Trump's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released new emails from Epstein that mention Trump by name, including one that says, quote, "He knew about the girls as he asked Elaine to stop," end quote. We should note President Trump has regularly denied any wrongdoing. We have a lot to get to with CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand at the White House. So let's kick things off. Good morning, Natalie. Let's start with the federal government reopening. What happens now, and what about those health care subsidies?
Yeah, that will remain, Errol, to be a key focus in the weeks ahead. The expiring Enhanced Affordable Care Act health subsidies that Democrats had been fighting for, really the reason for this shutdown. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries yesterday, late last night, told CBS News that the fight is not over, that they will continue to focus on this. And then there's the promise of a vote on health care in early December. And notably, President Trump, in his remarks late last night while signing the bill to reopen the government, said that he would be willing to work with Democrats on health care. But he also criticized the Affordable Care Act, said it needed to be fixed, and also suggested that money go directly to Americans and not to insurance companies. So the question now, do those comments start some sort of negotiation between Democrats and Republicans on this issue? What could we see on the Senate floor in early December? Now, in ending the shutdown overall, President Trump, with his signature last night, said that it sends a message that Republicans will not be extorted, in his words. He blamed Democrats for the shutdown. But important to note, Errol, that, polling during the duration of this record-long 43-day shutdown showed that neither party was getting good marks for this.
Yeah, the American people really blaming everyone there on Capitol Hill for it. On the Epstein files, though, what new information are we learning from them, and how is the White House responding?
Yeah, well, President Trump, he did not take questions last night on this topic during that bill signing. But in a social media post earlier in the day, he again called this a Democratic hoax, accused Democrats of trying to deflect on the shutdown. Now, House Democrats on the Oversight Committee, who released these emails yesterday as part of a vast trove of records obtained from the Epstein estate, say that they raised new questions about the nature of the relationship between Epstein and President Trump and whether he knew more than he's publicly and previously disclosed. In one of these emails released by House Democrats from Epstein to Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime associate who was convicted in connection with sex trafficking, Epstein calls Trump, quote, "the dog that hasn't barked," saying that one of the victims spent hours at, quote, "my house" with him, referring to President Trump. Another email between Epstein and author Michael Wolff says, of course, he knew about the girls as he asked Ghislaine to stop. Now, important to note that CBS News has not independently verified the emails. And the White House did put out a lengthy statement saying that, quote, "Democrats selectively leaked emails to the, quote, liberal media to create a fake narrative to smear President Trump." The victim referenced in the emails is the late Virginia Giuffre, who repeatedly said President Trump was not involved in wrongdoing. Again, that's a statement from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who also reiterated yesterday that President Trump, prior to becoming president, had kicked Epstein out of his Mar-a-Lago club in Florida, that there was this falling out between the two. As you mentioned, Errol, the president has denied wrongdoing. But this issue, the bottom line, it's not going away now that House members are back on Capitol Hill. As you noted, the newest Democratic member, Representative Grijalva, became the 218th signature. And interestingly enough, House Speaker Mike Johnson is expediting the timeline of this discharge petition and has promised to put this resolution to try and force the full release of the Epstein files on the floor next week, Errol.
Wow, remarkable. We'll have more on all of this in about 20 minutes from now. Natalie Brand with all the latest. Thank you, Natalie. CBS Evening News anchor John Dickerson spoke exclusively with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries yesterday to discuss the shutdown and what came from it.
It's unfortunate that Republicans have decided that they were going to shut the government down. They decided to rip away SNAP benefits from 42 million Americans when the money existed to make sure that not a single person went hungry. They decided that they would rather find $40 billion to bail out Argentina, but can't find a dime to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits.
So the short answer is yes, the shutdown was worth it.
The short answer is shutdowns are never things to be embraced. And unfortunately, Republicans decided to embrace a shutdown with their complete control of government rather than sit down with Democrats and find a bipartisan path forward.
Did you find any allies during the shutdown on this question, either health care or SNAP benefits, or anything that either surprised you or that you've been able to work with on the other side of the aisle? 3 words, Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's been very clear that this health care crisis is not made up, it's real. Republicans have no health care plan, and that Democrats are correct in fighting to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. 6 months ago, if I'd said to you, Leader Jeffries, Marjorie Taylor Greene is who you're going to be quoting as your ally on anything, would you have said, oh, that makes sense?
I would have said I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn.
How about that? Now, CBS News also asked Speaker Johnson for an interview. He declined. Now, while the government officially reopened the moment President Trump signed the continuing resolution into law, it could take days for certain services to really kick back in. So here's a quick look at why there's a lag in certain paused services resuming. And let's start with SNAP. This is the food assistance benefits that were paused November 1st. That money is expected to be dispersed to states immediately, but it could take a few days for each state agency to process the funds and send them to recipients. For example, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker told reporters Tuesday his state would restore it, quote, as fast as possible, but he couldn't say specifically how many days it would take. The federal government civilian workforce, meanwhile, missed about 3 million paychecks overall since the shutdown began. That's according to the Bipartisan Policy Center. Now, a 2019 law mandates those employees get back pay, quote, at the earliest date possible after the lapse ends, regardless of scheduled pay dates. But each agency or department's payroll center began processing back pay once the government reopened it. It also just may take a few days, and that depends on where the employee works as far as when they'll get their back pay. What about flights? Well, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy said Tuesday air traffic controllers will get 70% of their back pay within 24 to 48 hours of the shutdown ending, and the remaining 30% in a week. But it will still take days for the FAA to ease back its flight cuts and for airlines to restore schedules. Airlines for America, that's a major trade group representing the largest U.S. carriers, said this in a statement, that airlines, quote, cannot immediately bounce back to full capacity right after the government reopens. It will take time, and there will be residual effects for days. Airlines cancel flights 24 to 48 hours in advance. Once a flight is canceled, it can't be resurrected. So again, it should take a day or two for most carriers to get back to a full schedule once the FAA's mandatory flight cuts are ended. Now, thousands of federal employees are returning to work this morning as the government shutdown has come to a close. At least 670,000 government workers were on furlough during the shutdown, and another 730,000 were deemed essential. They were working without pay. Joining us now is Everett Kelly. He's the national president of the American Federation of Government Employees, which represents about 820,000 workers. Good morning, Everett. I just want to get a gut check with you today. What's the sentiment among your members now that the government has been reopened?
You know, and thank you for having me. And the members that I represent, they are ecstatic. They are happy that the government's open. They can now get back to life. They can get back to business. They can make sure that there's food on the table, make sure that bills are paid, because that's exactly what they want to do. And they also want to provide a service for the American people.
But to go 43 days for some without double paychecks, how challenging has it been for your members? What are some of the stories either they've shared with you or your own that really underscore how serious this experience was for so many?
I heard so many stories, and some of them, you don't even want to repeat. Matter of fact, you don't even want them in your mind. Some of the sites that I've seen, I've stood myself in missions in rural Maryland, serving federal employees food as they come through the line with little children, pregnant mothers, and all of these types of things, that we had to deal with and that they had to deal with. And it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't a beautiful sight. These are people that really want to work. These are people that, have a job, but to know that they got to resort to standing in line, long lines to get food to eat for their families, it's not a pretty sight, and they was very devastated. One lady came through, she was a pregnant mother, didn't know how she was going to deal with issues because insurance, everything is due, but I'm grateful today that this has finally come to an end.
Now, how long can you be grateful, though? Because this deal only extends funding through January. It's evident that Democrats and Republicans have a very difficult time getting on the same page. What is your message to lawmakers as they look to negotiate again in just a few months?
Well, I certainly hope that they will consider the fact that federal employees should be in the middle of this political animosity, okay? They just shouldn't be there. And I hope that they will consider the human factor as they go through and negotiate issues. And I hope that they'll negotiate, in a way that is beneficial to the American people. That's what we got to have, so that's what I'm looking forward to.
All right, Everett Kelly, we appreciate you sharing what the experience has been for your membership. Keep your calendar open in the next couple months. You may be back here giving us more reaction for next time. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
The House voted last night to approve the Senate version of the measure, sending it to the president's desk, as you see here. 6 Democrats voted to approve the bill, but the rest voted against it. Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva was one of those no votes. The Democrat from Arizona was finally sworn in yesterday, weeks after winning her special election, and she wasted no time becoming the 218th and final signature on a discharge petition to force a vote to release the Epstein files.
Why was it important to you to be that final signature?
I committed to it, and I believe very strongly that it is about getting justice for the survivors. And I can't imagine having to wait for so long to finally be able to get this close.
And we'll hear from Nikole in just a few seconds. The House Speaker says we won't have to wait long for the vote we've just mentioned. The lower chamber will take up the petition next week. Democrats accuse Speaker Johnson of delaying Grijalva's swearing in because of the Epstein files. But he has defended the decision, and lawmakers work to investigate Jeffrey Epstein.
I'll remind everybody, the Oversight Committee has been working around the clock, even through the government shutdown, for maximum transparency and full disclosure, as we have all been for since the very beginning.
And with the government reopening, travelers and airlines seem to be breathing a sigh of relief. The FAA froze flight cuts for today at 6%. They were supposed to increase to 8% because of the shutdown-related air traffic controller shortage. But with the busy Thanksgiving travel season right around the corner, airlines are warning there could still be some delays. And we have a team of correspondents covering every angle of these stories for you. Scott McFarlane is on the Epstein case and the new emails just released. Nancy Cordes has the president's response to that. You also see Chris Van Cleve following the airline's response to the shutdown ending. But let's begin with Nikole Killion on Capitol Hill. Nikole, we saw you with Adelita Grijalva. We'll ask about that in just a moment. But first, the longest shutdown in U.S. history is now over. How did the vote play out?
Well, what was interesting is that we saw 6 Democrats cross party lines to join Republicans in backing this spending package, which is a wider margin, even though it's narrow, but wider than what we saw when the House first passed government funding back in September. There was just, I believe, one defection. And, I had asked Leader Hakeem Jeffries several times this week if he expected any defections within his caucus, particularly given the criticism that the defectors defectors in the Senate received, with some people even calling on Minority Leader Chuck Schumer to resign over all of this. So it was notable that you saw 6 Democrats there cross party lines. Speaker Mike Johnson told me that he believes those Democrats did the right thing.
And Arizona's Adelita Grijalva was finally sworn into Congress yesterday. This tees up a House vote on the Epstein files. What did she share with you about what she's thinking now?
Well, look, you know, this has been a long time coming. She was certainly anxious to be sworn in. You know, this even got into litigation as far as trying to be seated, with Arizona's Attorney General filing suit against the Speaker. So, look, you know, she said she was full of emotion yesterday when this moment finally came to pass, where she was able to take the oath of office, be sworn in. But she obviously holds Speaker Mike Johnson responsible for this delay, and so I asked her about that. Take a listen.
You blame one person, Speaker Mike Johnson, for holding up your swearing in. Do you think this was personal?
No, I don't think it was personal. I think it was strategic. I think that he was trying to prevent the release of the Epstein files, and I know that if I were a Republican, I would not have been waiting.
Now, I did ask her after that if she gives the Speaker the benefit of the doubt in any way, because, you know, when they had a photo op together, they did this mock swearing in, you know, the Speaker was very complimentary of Congresswoman Grijalva, saying that he believes she'll be an excellent member and that he served under her father, the late Raul Grijalva, and that he was simply going by the customs of the House in terms of swearing her in when he did. But she said, you know, she disagrees with that and really does believe that this was politically motivated, mostly because of the Epstein files, which she signed on the floor as soon as she delivered her maiden speech.